mental illness each year. I think that that number is probably a little bit low. I imagine based on my unscientific estimation, I think our incidence of mental illness is probably a little bit higher than that. Recently, NAMI published this stat that suicide is the second leading cause of death for older teens, young adults, and the 10th cause of death overall. We know that people with mental illness do experience rejection and bullying and discrimination. In a 2014 study, they found that 4 out of 5 patients with mental illness were also unemployed. And similarly, they found that 8 out of 10 employees with mental health illness do not seek treatment due to fear or shame-based reasons. And so that really leads to this process of internalizing that stigma, internalizing it to the point of shame. So now at one time you were feeling bad and you didn't seek help, but now you have a belief that you are bad. And we've all interacted with clients like that. And so here's a very low statistic. 20% of those with mental illness will not seek help. I found another statistic that said 70% of people with mental illness will not seek help. So I don't really know which one is right. I think it's probably the second one, but we wanted to publish a conservative stat. And sadly, these groups, ethnic minorities, youth, men, military, and health professionals, are most impacted by this stigma. The interesting thing about this Neuer study that we're citing here at the end of this slide is that unlike the Schneider team, they found that personal stigma, not perceived public stigma, was more impactful in terms of help seeking. Their population group were teenagers. So it makes sense, given where they are developmentally, that their personal attitudes toward people with mental illness might be more impactful to them. So go ahead, next slide, please. So one thing that all the research sort of agrees about is that both personal and perceived public stigma can be minimized by increasing mental health literacy. So mental health literacy is knowledge and beliefs about mental disorders, which can aid in their recognition, management, and prevention, right? Recognition, management, and prevention. Those things would seem to be the opposite of stigma. Recognition, management, prevention would be things that we could do to the greater population of people with mental illness that might encourage them to seek help more readily. And so if you go ahead to the next one, Stephanie. So what we want to share with you about AI is that frequently mental health literacy is actually the focus of most of the AI-based services. And you're going to see this as we show you some examples later on. And because it's so easy to access, our working theory is that AI will then improve mental health literacy because so many people can access it so easily once people understand what's available out there. And that, of course, improved mental health literacy decreases public and perceived public stigma as well as personal stigma. And that the more people are using these tools, then hopefully, right, that's our working theory, the more people will seek mental health treatment. So part of the reason that we think this will work this way is because AI is available all the time, anytime, private, free, most of it's free, and you're interacting with a machine, so a machine can't judge you, right? It feels anonymous, even though we're going to find, as we talk about this a little bit more, it might not be completely anonymous, but certainly that people who have been otherwise reluctant to seek help due to stigma now have a way. They have a way to get some kind of help, some kind of even perceived help as they're thinking about their lives and the issues that they have. So when we talk about how, go ahead, Stephanie, how AI can be implemented in counseling,
What the
Um,
fuck? All these fucking things are wrong.
I
so,
could, okay.
okay. Okay. Um, so we went back to the ACA 2020 definition of counseling. And if you remember, it's sort of a three-part definition. One, that we have professional relationships with diverse populations. Two, that we're empowering them in some sort of way. And three, that they're accomplishing their goals. And so in measuring the past, present, and future of AI, we measure those against those three elements of the counseling definition. So historical, in the past, the first little chatbot was Eliza, and that was all the way in 1966, if you can imagine that. So me included, those of us, we think this is a brand new thing. It's been around for a long time. And so that historical lens is just sort of rudimentary in their responses. So a client might say, men are all alike. And Eliza would say, in what way? And then a client would say, well, they're always bugging us about something. And she says, can you give me an example? And she says, my boyfriend, he made me come here. She says, your boyfriend made you come here? And the client says, yeah, he says that I'm depressed. And she says, I'm sorry to hear you're depressed. So very automated, very rudimentary, very monotone responses, right, Eliza? And then today, contemporary, we measure against these three things, right? Historically, they didn't really accomplish any of those things. Today, what we know is AI isn't really establishing a professional relationship. We're not exactly sure how much they might be empowering people because we haven't really measured that. And we think that some people are accomplishing their goals because there is some research to show some of these applications have been useful in depression and PTSD, et cetera. So that's past and present. Future, the dawn of AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. This has not been developed yet, but there is thinking out there amongst those in the community that AGI will be able to meet all those three criteria, that they will be able to establish a professional relationship, empower, and help accomplish goals. And that the age of superintelligence is going to be when AI surpasses human intelligence. So there's certainly a lot for us to think about in terms of the possibilities. So let's flip it back to Steph to talk about how it actually works.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was such a great introduction. So now thinking about the super intelligence, now what are the possibilities right now? What's currently being researched, right? Right now, research is focusing a lot on the clinical evaluation and treatment of clients, and maybe perhaps automating that process. And what Dr. Colburn was talking about in terms of people feeling comfortable disclosing things they wouldn't disclose to people and having those disclosure concerns, there have been studies that indicate that compared to a person in a health setting in general, someone may be more willing to disclose feelings of depression to a computer interviewer as opposed to perhaps a nurse interviewer in perhaps any type of health setting. So that is really fascinating in and of itself. And through that interviewing process, the AI can gather diagnostic information and analyze it, and then feed it back potentially to the therapist or to the health practitioner. The AI, as we know currently, delivers evidence-based interventions, and that is primarily CBT interventions and its ilk. And so we know that to be true in terms of there's some bots that we'll talk about later that do have been proven successful in treating PTSD, improving anxiety, and improving symptoms of depression as well. So it can also potentially recommend certain types of treatment. There's a study that indicates that there is a certain type of treatment that could be applied to people who are in treatment for substance abuse. And the AI can actually, based on the individual's responses or the client's responses in a substance abuse treatment program, can predict the outcomes for certain types of treatment for that particular client. So that's on the horizon. The AI can potentially provide feedback to the therapist about how the therapist is doing in session. And that could be in the form of having a listening device in session and having the AI analyze the therapist's responses and the client's responses to the therapist. That's already being done in terms of text therapy. If we talk about what's out there in terms of talk space, there's a text therapy, and the text therapy is able to be analyzed, and the text therapist can tell whether or not the client is responding via text in a way that shows improvement or receptivity to what they're saying. We know that AI in current studies indicate that it can predict suicide attempts in gathering health information from multiple data sources. And people who come into the hospital or seek health services and indicate that they've injured themselves in the past. There are also AI programs that can search through a child's cell phone to determine whether or not that child is experiencing cyberbullying or may be experiencing depression as well. So there's so many variety of applications that are either out there currently being used or currently being researched and in the process. So it's really exciting stuff. So what is conversational artificial intelligence? It's essentially a software program like a chatbot. And Dr. Colburn talked about Eliza, the very rudimentary first chatbot. And so we're improving how the chatbot responds. And part of that is if we're talking about responses and interacting with the chatbot, we inevitably get to the topic of Alan Turing and the Turing test. Alan Turing, as you may know, was a British mathematician and was famous for decoding the Enigma during World War II at Bletchley Park. And that was the cipher that the Nazis used. And he was able to decode that and take part in decoding that. He's also called the grandfather of artificial intelligence. And he theorized that a machine is intelligent if a human can't detect the responses as being from a computer, right? And so we know that in order to have an impact on mental health, that the Turing test doesn't have to be passed, right? So, because that's really hard to do. You know, even if we think about the most current chatbots, and we'll get to those, there's always a sense of, well, we know it's not a human being, and there's an understanding there when we enter into conversations with these chatbots and clients enter into conversations with these chatbots. It's not an actual human, but it's there to respond to us and assist us in any way that it can. And it's very fascinating at the same time. Even though a person may understand that they're talking to a computer, they'll still respond to that chatbot psychologically as if it were human. So it's a really interesting balance between, you know, knowing, well, this isn't a real human conversation, but also knowing at the same time that a human created it, and it was created to assist us and help us get through whatever symptoms that we may be experiencing, whether it be anxiety, depression, and so on. So let's have a little bit, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but here's the underpinnings of AI, right? So there's something called natural language processing, where AI can, you know, we know it's digitized, it's ones and zeros, but at the same time, it has to take in language and spit out language in the way that we understand it and the way that we communicate. So that's the basis of all these chatbots and the Turing test and so on. And machine learning is a machine or computer's ability to take information that we input into it and instruction from us, and then use that to make connections and find patterns in sets of data that it receives. And neural network is a type of machine learning that is not only rudimentary and makes very basic connections based on what we tell it to do, but it finds nonlinear connections. So if we say A plus B equals C, then maybe D plus E equals F as well. And so the neural network is learning and making connections and patterns and using that to improve on what we input into it. And deep learning is really complex. It uses big data and large data sets. So if we think of, you know, if we think of that AI that is able to take in large amounts of information and then determine whether or not there's someone that has a suicide risk. Sometimes that's a lot of data, and there's a nonlinear relationship being determined there. Super learning is currently predicted to develop outcomes, developed to predict outcomes in certain types of treatment, like the substance abuse treatment that I was talking about as well. So how do we categorize this? There are different approaches, right? Because, you know, like I said, there's just a wide variety of applications that we can use AI in mental health. So one of them is, well, the first we know in terms of delivering mental health services and counseling services is just our basic human-to-human connection. There is a human delivery and AI informed. There's an AI delivery and human supervised, and there's AI only. So I'll get into each one of these. Again, this is how we do therapy. It's person to person, and currently, you know, for the most part, unless we're students who are recording our sessions, the therapy is only heard by the client and the clinician, the client and the therapist. So how does that change when we use AI to inform how we're delivering therapy? Can AI improve our ability to deliver therapy? As in the listening device potentially being connected and giving feedback to the therapist that I was talking about earlier, or the text therapy that gives the feedback to the therapist and it says, hey, this response was good, this wasn't so good, right? And it detects clinically relevant information through that natural language processing that I was talking about and relays that information back to the therapist so the therapist can improve. So that's one potential. Another potential, like I was talking about earlier, is this collaboration between AI and humans in which the AI will deliver some or part of the therapy or all of the therapy potentially, and the human would either supervise it or pick up where the AI left off. And that could be in the form of the initial interview that you would have the AI conduct. And again, take in that information, maybe perhaps even recommend a diagnosis, recommend treatment based on that initial interview and information that it gathers. And as we know, again, people are actually more willing to disclose this information to artificial intelligence. So another task that could be delegated to AI is, basically is supplemental interventions. So the AI would deliver certain interventions and the therapist would be checking in with the client about it, or it would be just a collaboration between the two. So if you've ever said or told a client, use the Calm app, or there's a meditation app that I like out there, that could be one way. Another way could be maybe there are CBT modalities that you'd like the client to use, and you can go through them in session, but you don't know that they're going home and actually doing their homework and coming back to you the next week, having been informed by that practice. Perhaps the AI could take over that function and assist the client in doing their homework, essentially. So those are certain ways that it could be AI delivered and human supervised. And then there's AI only, without therapist intervention and no expectation of supervision of the use of AI. And that's what we have right now with the apps that are readily available. Okay, so let's talk about these apps, right? What's going on with them? Some of them are only journal-based, or they're only educational. So you'll go in and it'll have different lessons that you can click into and learn all about mental health, all about anxiety, all about depression, and ways to relieve your symptoms. Some of them are only chatbots, and a lot of them, though, are all educational chatbot. And there's one that even connects with text-based services or can refer you to an actual counselor. So we'll talk more about that. The first one that I want to share with you is called Youper, and this was some of my conversations with Youper and some results that I have here. And as you see, what it does is it introduces itself to you. And you get, if you look at the bottom, you'll get a couple of responses that you can give. Usually it's 2 or 3 responses that are available to you. So it's interesting in that a lot of these apps will give you a few options to choose from, but it really won't let you enter in your own response because it's still very rudimentary right now. So I told Youper that I was feeling fairly anxious. And why? Because I'm sedentary. I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm not able to go out. I'm under quarantine, right? And so its response was, it's understood. And that it can be hard to admit that, but that scientists know that you just saying that you're anxious helps you feel more emotionally stable. Well, that was really interesting, and that was very educational for me, right? And there's also this component where you learn about yourself. This is really like a Myers-Briggs test. So that's a cool aspect to it. So a lot of them have this sort of auxiliary educational component where either you learn more about yourself or you learn about a certain topic of your choosing. This one does anxiety monitoring. So right now my anxiety score is moderate or mild. Sorry, I have a mild anxiety right now, and it tells me all about that. And so it'll prompt you to check in and how's your anxiety right now? And then, see if is it improving over time? Well, that's where we want it to be. We want it to be no anxiety by the 31st of May. And let's hope that's the case for everyone. Okay. So the next one is Woebot, which always gets me every time I say it. So this is just a chatbot, and there are other functions here too, educational functions, but it's mainly just a chatbot, and it just talks to you about what's going on, and then it gets into a little bit more of how you're feeling, but it kind of eases you into it. So as you can see, it's talking about the coronavirus. And again, you get these 3 options at the bottom, 2 or 3 options that you can choose. And you can see where we left it on the second picture. I can choose that's nice, I saw that too, or can you show me the video of the Italians singing from their apartment windows? And it went through a little bit of history with me too. So it's just like just chatting. And we have a video all about Woebot. If we have time to show it, we do. So let's get that started. I think what I'm gonna have to do is stop sharing and I'm gonna go back to the video. So I'll do that really quickly. Unless I think I did check the 2 boxes when I went in. So should we try?
If you just press play, let's see.
Play? Okay.
Today we kick off our series Future.
Can you hear that?
A high-tech way to improve your mental health.
One San Francisco-based company is providing a friend to chat with. It just so happens that friend's a robot. Meet Woebot, an on-demand therapist powered by artificial intelligence.
That's the kind of tool that Woebot is. It's there for you when you need it.
It's therapy at the touch of your fingertips, anytime, any place.
Woebot is a sort of in-the-moment emotional assistant, friendly character that just texts you on your phone every day and says, hey, how's your day going? How do you feel?
After years of clinical research at Stanford, psychologist Allison Darcy founded Woebot using the principles of cognitive.
Stephanie, we just lost audio. You
Are
have
you
to
on mute? If you're
unmute yourself. There you
Sorry
go.
about that.
Evidence
you can just turn your audio up as well, Stephanie.
very practical approach to mental health.
Woebot engages in daily check-ins that can last anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Over time, the chatbot builds an emotional model of the user, helping identify distorted thinking.
What we might have underestimated to begin with is the power of the tiny conversation in the moment that you need it. Being able to reach out to something that says, hey, hang on a second, let's talk through this. It has the potential to just kind of stop that negative spiral. I think of what we've learned in the psychological field is that it is these tiny adjustments over time that make a really big impact.
It's exactly what college student Shishi Feng was looking for after the pressures of freshman year left her anxious.
I started researching for online therapy. That's when I came across Woebot.
At first, Shishi used the app daily.
He teaches you how to process your emotions and how to deal with them. Just a lot of tips and tricks.
Today, she sees a therapist, but continues her relationship with Woebot.
It's filling in the blanks whenever my therapist isn't available. And whenever I'm feeling really down or really anxious, really depressed, Woebot's kind of like this safe space for me to share my thoughts and feelings.
Since its launch last year, an estimated 2 million conversations taking place each week across 130 countries.
Depression has already become the leading cause of disability around the world. At the same time that these mental health needs are increasing, there's a huge shortage in mental health professionals available.
Darcy hopes that Woebot can help bridge that gap.
Woebot will never replace therapy because there's no replacement for human connection, and there never really will be. The fact that Woebot is not human is part of the thing that makes it so useful. Sometimes it's easier for people to confide in something when they know it's not human.
Psychiatrist Dr. Sue Varma joins us now to answer a few questions about the app. So, Doctor, do you think this is a good idea?
I think that it certainly can help people who are already in therapy. It's certainly not meant to replace it. So much of cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on what's happening in between sessions, right? So therapy doesn't happen in a vacuum. As a trained cognitive behavioral therapist, I give people homework assignments to track their mood, to challenge their distortions in thinking. And this app can be a supplement. It's even for some people who are not sure about therapy, right? It's an entry point. And also it can be a booster for people.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. Kind of we get the idea and concept that it's a supplement to therapy and doesn't replace therapy, but augments it, right? So that's important. Oops, how do I? Oh, there we go. Okay, so the next app is 7 Cups, 7 Cups of Tea. And so what this adds not only is a chatbot, but connecting someone to either text-based mental health services or else, in-person services too. So it can connect you to a therapist. It also has a community, which was really interesting. And you can actually, even if you don't have any background in mental health, you can become an online volunteer listener. And you can do that by simply taking an active listening course and volunteering. And so it's really fascinating. It's almost like a dating app in a sense, where you can search through people's profiles and other people will rate how good of a listener they are. And they'll say, I like to listen to this age group, and I like to talk about this sort of thing. And so it's really fascinating in the way that it establishes this community, and it just asks you straight up, do you want to talk to other people in our community or enter a group and talk about how your day went? So that is a really cool aspect to 7 Cups, and the company is called 7 Cups of Tea. I really love self-care. It's called #self-care. And it's because it's modeled as a AI. It's actually AI, but it's a first person AI. And so it says we, like it uses a royal we, and says sometimes we need to be patient with ourselves. Sometimes we need to take time. Sometimes we need to just gaze out the window and, enjoy life. And so what you do is you can go into the room, and this is just a half a screen, but it has sort of an overview, and you investigate things in the room, almost like a virtual reality. And if you click on the kitten, for example, the cat pops up, and the kitten responds to you touching the screen. So it's an AI in the sense that it responds to your actual screen touch, and various things in the room can do that as well. So Dr. Colburn is going to talk about some of the more advanced robots and chatbots we have out there.
Yeah, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go really fast through this. TESS, TESS was used is still being used for college age populations. And they did find that when they gave TESS, chatbot, when they gave college students access to TESS unlimited, and then they checked in with the students either once a week or every day or every 4 weeks, at different time intervals, they did find that it had a significant impact on their symptoms of depression and anxiety. Ellie, I'm going to show you in just a second. Ellie is the latest virtual reality robot, avatar style, and you will see, we're going to show you another video. You'll see how she works and how she senses what the client is doing, and she senses the activity level in the client, the pace of their voice, the pitch of their voice, and she chooses a different behavior, a different response based on that. It's pretty neat. And then Paro was invented in Japan, and Paro is it's a robot, but it's a seal, a baby seal, and Paro's used just like animal therapy. We'll see if, I don't know if we'll have enough time to show that video as well, but let's go ahead and watch Ellie in action. And then Stephanie, you have to unmute yourself, otherwise we won't be able to hear it.
And please feel free to tell me anything. Your answers are totally confidential. Are you okay with this?
Yes.
So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
That's good. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, I'm from LA myself. When was the last time you felt really happy?
When was the last time? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not someone who's really like, I don't have any real highs. I feel like I'm a level person. It's just happy. I guess to answer your question, probably a couple months ago.
I noticed you were hesitant on that one. Would you say you are generally a happy person?
I'm generally happy. It's just lately there are things just keeping me down.
Can you tell me more about that? When was the last time you felt really happy?
You want to stop there?
Yeah,
Okay.
we should stop. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. So I hope that as you were watching that, you saw the little labeling across the bottom of the screen that said what was happening and how Ellie was perceiving different things and how she was then choosing her behaviors as a result of that. So that's our contemporary virtual reality. So Paro, as I said, is a baby seal. Paro was invented in Japan in 2002 and comes in a couple of different colors. And he's cuddly, just like that old man is cuddling him. And he responds to, I've made him a he. I'm not really sure why, but maybe it's a she, I don't know. I think it's a he. So he responds to light, sound, temperature, touch, and posture. He knows his name, and so if you call him by name, he responds. He squeaks happily, almost like a little baby being very gleeful. And he's been used in nursing homes mostly with Alzheimer's patients and also other kinds of patients treating for depression and anxiety because he fills that gap of companionship for people who are lonely. And so they found not only do the patients get a lower stress level, but the helpers do too, because the helpers take time and pet him, etc., and are able to take advantage of some of the same things that the others are. So those are some of our recent bots and chat bots that you have been able to take a look at.
Thanks so much. And so what are the future implications? So right now, like I said, mainly, and there's CBT that's being delivered. But what about other theories? What if we had a chatbot that delivered Gestalt therapy? You know, that's on the horizon potentially. How do we use virtual reality and AI and integrate neuroscience in our understandings of neuroscience? That's one of my areas of interest. I really like that virtual reality app, and I like the use of AI with virtual reality. I really love that. And how do we use our understanding of how the brain works and really target that through AI? What are the multicultural implications? And this is something that's really actually being researched by some other professors at Northwestern. So in terms of the AI, it's really fascinating in that because we're talking about language processing, how is it responding to us? Is it responding to us as though we are a white middle-class Midwesterner, right? How do we adjust that response, or how do we learn how to apply AI across cultures and use that across cultures? Because it's really fascinating in that there's, and I don't want to get too much into this, but if you've heard about those self-driving cars, for example, the self-driving cars were taught to detect pedestrians, but they were only taught to detect pedestrians who had light skin, for example, and they were found to be more prone to hit people with darker skin. So it's just that whole multicultural aspect that we really have to be considerate of and take into account. There are ethical standards that we really need to develop. Right now, there are, it's really not regulated at all. And I'll get more into some proposed ethics in the next slide. And also, what is the research on computer learning that's out there? Like I was talking about this sort of neural networks and deep learning. How far does that go? It does have limitations. So here's an ethics code that has recently been proposed, just came out, and is proposed by a company called X2, or X2 AI, and they have they're the creators of TESS, the TESS robot that Dr. Colburn spoke about. And so this is them self-monitoring and proposing that mental health chatbots and mental health AI need to have a certain set of standards that every developer should abide by. It's do no harm, minimize bias, maximize inclusion, right, in terms of multicultural considerations, operate with integrity, and inform users about service and their rights, and maintain the highest standards for privacy and data. And right now it's not regulated at all. So they're really on the forefront and cutting edge of offering up these ethical codes potentially. So what are the limitations? It's not advanced enough just yet. There are many unknowns, including privacy and ethics. Again, it's unregulated. We know that the human touch is necessary. It's not going to replace us. It's not going to replace therapists anytime soon. And it may be necessary in terms of what therapy really is, to have some human component to it. So it also may be counterproductive potentially to individuals who really need to connect with people. Maybe they're on the computer all day, and we don't want AI to encourage that behavior either. So those are some limitations. So let's talk about it. What's your reaction to all of this? I want to know. Do you think it'll
Tiffany,
stop? Yeah.
Yeah, there were a couple of questions in here if you want to
Okay.
respond.
I didn't see that. Yeah, let me
That's
just.
okay. Yeah, I'll read them to you. It's okay.
Okay.
So the first question was, how is the counseling information stored in any of this stuff? How is that data stored?
Well, you would hope that it would be HIPAA compliant, but in terms of where is it stored?
Where is it stored? I think that the real question is about client privacy, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a huge deal, and privacy is a big part of this. Again, this ethical code that is definitely in there. The highest standards of privacy and data rights, and so it's not regulated right now, but that's definitely something that should be regulated and is on the horizon. So
right. The next question was about disclosure and confidentiality, like in the 7 Cups app. What kind of vetting did those volunteer listeners go through? What kind of, like, can anybody be a volunteer just because they decide to be one?
I think so. I'm not sure. I'm sure they're monitored, but I don't know the answer to that, other than all I could see was you could volunteer to be one by taking a course on active listening.
Right.
And the people that I saw were not mental health professionals. And when you're talking to them, you know that they're not. They're just listeners.
Right. So there is a difference. And then this other question that's in here, also a very good question. Is there any screening method for those who suffer from more serious mental illness that might play around with some of this, a text chat bot or an Ellie type of a thing, but who they really actually do need more serious help? Is there any screening for that?
I don't know about that. That's a really excellent question.
Yeah. Like the ethical issue, that comes up for me as I'm thinking about this as an educator, right, is we know when we get into it with clients, especially if we get in too far, too deep, too fast, we can cause harm to them, right?
Right.
So if a client over discloses to Ellie because they feel safe, then really where does that leave that client? Interesting.
Right, that is really fascinating. And I know tests, for example, I'm pretty sure that there's a way to detect if somebody's having extreme distress, and then it provides information as to like a suicide helpline and so on. And so if it gets to that point in terms of suicidality and so on, I know that test, for example, has that sort of function where it'll go into emergency mode, and I think it even allows you to or contact someone else, or if you ask it to.
Yeah, interesting. And if you want to take us out of share screen,
Okay.
I think that's okay. We'll just talk about this so you can also see the chat. But the question is, what do they do after they do detect that there might be suicidality? Then what do they do with that information?
That's a great question. I know it does. I know it does provide a helpline. I don't know the specifics of how it kind of goes through those steps, and it detects if it detects that suicidality. But that is, I mean, again, it's those are things that we're going to have to really, really focus on, and those are really important questions. Those are really important topics. So thank you for bringing that up. I know someone in here said that they knew a lot about AI. It was somebody who was familiar. Who was that? I want to know if they want to jump in, if they know the answers. Is that David?
Yes, yes, I'm familiar. I did
Hi.
some research. Hi, hello. I did some research in this topic, and I've presented at the ACES the last October. I'm teaching AI and artificial intelligence and counseling at Western Connecticut University. It's a course, it's an active course, just started last year. So yeah, there are a lot of concerns related to the ethical. About 7 cups, I know for sure that they don't need, as you said, to be a counselor, so they don't need to respond to any ethical guidelines, and this is a huge concern. Usually, for my knowledge, usually these apps accept Woebot, as you cited, and they don't have particular attention to privacy. So this is another big concerns.
Right.
So as you said before, and I just say a couple of words about what you did. I really liked what you did, both of you. This was a tremendous job, connecting the idea of destigmatization with AI. It's a really a good topic, and I like the way that you brought this in this presentation. Thank you so much. I just want to say
thank you. And thank you for contributing. I really appreciate it. It's so good to have you all as well, just interested in contributing and chatting. And it's really been a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you, Davide.
Yeah.
I love this comment in the chat that a communication AI would be helpful for students who are having trouble learning how to converse. It's
Right.
interesting, even as we were talking, as we were doing the presentation tonight, I have my counselor educator hat on, getting ready for my brand new cohort of Methods 1 students, right? Basic counseling skills. It's interesting to me how we might be able to use this with students for training. I think it would be a neat thing to investigate.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And I know there are robots that help autistic children. It can help to keep them company and communicate and talk. And then they're also used for somebody's got their mic on. Lorraine?
Mute.
Yeah, I did that. So it also helps with people who suffer from social anxiety as well. And would they be age appropriate for adolescents? I mean, that's a great question. The 7 Cups does have a teen listener. A lot of the listeners that I saw were teens. And Woebot, it was definitely talking about adult stuff, but I could see Woebot being good for adolescents. And I really love the self-care app because it's just very much, this is my room, this is where I'm at. And that seems to be really, it would be really cool for teens and adolescents.
Right, that last thing is for CE credit. So I know we're just over our time. We got to let the new folks come in and get themselves set up. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. And we hope that this stirred up some thinking in you about the potential uses for AI in counseling and in counselor ed. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye. Oh, baby. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go because I have to go to another webinar for Methods 2. So great job, Stephanie. Good job.
Can I just end the meeting, or is it?
Yeah, you can just leave the meeting.
Leave it. Don't end it. Leave it.
Leave
yeah, leave it. Make yourself not the host and then leave. Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
If you just leave or press X on it, a box will pop up and ask you ending the meeting.
You want to see my shirt today?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yes, you see a kid?
Oh, that's your shirt?
These were our work clothes today.
Your nightgown? I mean, pajamas top?
No, I didn't have no pajama top.